this there's this distinction, or there's this balance between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And we can hope and assume that the spirit, the letter of the law has climbed toward the spirit of the law. And one of the ways, there are infinite ways, but one of the ways we can think about the spirit of the law simply is that God has written the spiritual law. Man has written the written law. The letter of the law, the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. So from a man, persons, man derived from the Latin manus, hand, not man, male. Male, right? Because patriarch, Peter, pater, that was all kind of, sort of, derived from the wee. But the name, the word, the English word man, and we might deride English in preference for the ancient languages. But there's a reason why English has become the dominant language, because English, practically speaking, not, okay, because there's idealism there's idealism as it expresses itself. Idealism is a dynamic process. People don't talk about that. That number itself, all is number, right? Pythagoras famously, all is number, the 3, 4, 5 triangle, famous to both intellectual, theoretical Pythagoreans and also everyday carpenters who are trying to square up a wall with a bit of string or maybe a tape measure. Wait, I gotta work back now. Squareness. Idealism, materialism, physicalism. I just had to pause it there. Oh yeah. Because number itself, all is number. But number itself is dynamic. Number itself is dynamic. Everything spirals out, and it spirals on top of spirals on top of spirals. We can imagine this a little bit in the Mandelbrot set, especially the beautiful images of the Mandelbrot set that have been produced very recently. I mean, historically, they've been released today, but like contemporarily, because everything's moving so fast. When we talk about the colorific Mandelbrot set graphic expressions, because there are graphical expressions of the Mandelbrot set, and there are multiple color and deep dive versions of the Mandelbrot set. And in there are many spirals, but it's still not spirals on top of spirals on top of spirals on top of spirals. And I guess that's actually not the way also the universe works. But it speaks to it. You know, I was listening to this fella today on the Pints with Aquinas podcast. I forget his name. But he was talking about, what was he talking about? I'll have to think for a sec. I'm not sure where I was going with that, but I'm going to move on. He was certainly talking a lot about information theory. I believe he referenced a man named Minor Coleman, but what I found online was Mark Coleman. Philosophy of Science, Ontic, Structural Realism. It was a beautiful contingency argument for God that was better than Aquinas's. Much better. Just saying. Thank you. Mark? What was I trying to get to? Oh yes, what I was trying to get to was that I'm 45, 46, and in another few days I'll be 46, 47. I think I'm 45. 77, 23. Yeah, so I think I'm turning 46. Yeah, 46. I know I look older. Hygiene has taken a back seat in just about every way imaginable. What little bit of hygiene I have, I fight for. That's where I'm at in my life. And it may be the place where I'm defeated. So I'm not justifying it, I'm confessing it. I'm not exposing it to justify it. I'm exposing it to confess it, but also I hope in my decrepitude I can give some comfort. There are many of those who are much older than me, who in some ways look more decrepit, but who I know are more healthy. I'm working for an older couple now, a retired couple who had been Ivy League professors, and I've been working at their house for like 2.5 months, and they're older than me, and there's things, it's been snowing a lot lately, and their plow guy, who's probably overstressed and has like 60 driveways to plow, either before or after his other regular real job that he has to go to, who's in a hurry, doesn't always do the best job. So sometimes when we show up to jobs, and my boss is especially good about this, and if it weren't for his example, because there's plenty of jobs I've worked on where when I pull in the driveway and it's full of snow, I just pull into the snow, clomp into their pristine house with my dirty boots and my dirty pants and my dirty everything, my dirty paws, and just start grubbing all over every surface of their house, But my boss, I really look up to my boss. When he sees something wrong, he fixes it. Not so it's perfect, because we don't have time for perfection. But we have time to make everything better than it was. Man. What I wanted to talk about was how I'm an adolescent. I'm not sure if I'll get there, but I at least want to mention what I wanted to talk about. But I'm so happy I said what I said about my boss. He doesn't like being called a boss. Remember when I was younger, one of our coworkers, who I was quite friendly with, and he was quite friendly with, And we hung out a few times together, the three of us, and he'd joke about how he didn't like it when she introduced him to people she knew as his boss, because he's like, I'm your friend. First. He didn't say it that way, but that's like the impression I got from the way he said it. He said it in a more pokey, fun way. He likes to tease and he likes to be teased, so it was a little more teasy, but with a big smile. And he's got like a really big face, so his smile is huge. He never talks about like religion or ethics or this, that, whatever. Ever. And he always does the right thing. It's a pisser, man. It's like, who the fuck is this guy? Which is why I work for him. Because I'm a house painter. I've been a house painter for like 15 years. But before that, for 5 years, I was I sold paint. I met hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of painters. Because in that time period, I worked in several different markets. I moved up the ladder quickly. I had a promising future. To my estimations, I could have retired with $1 million between my 401k and my pension by the time I was 40, which for me was, I guess, almost 6 years ago. So the person in me that crunches numbers said, why the fuck didn't you do it? But the person in me who crunches like spirit, body, and soul says, you would have already been dead, Mr. Jeff. I would have already been dead. And I wouldn't have had that freedom, nor would have I had that philosophical, spiritual, religious, theological, humanitarian, not in the parochialized way we use that word, because humanitarian is an enormous concept, is an enormous word. The word humanitarian. It's an enormous word. But we only focus on one very narrow cone of that sphere in modern day. So, anyway. Humanitarian in the global sense of understanding what it means to be human. In the same way that Jesus, so it is said, was completely human and completely divine. Might I add that the word divine is a terrible way to speak about godliness. Because divine the prefix, so like the main root of the word isn't the prefix, but the prefix comes first, and even the word prefix means before the fixation, before the position. So, before the vine, before the entanglement with God, before the marriage, there's a division. Yes, because of our fallenness. And there are many ways to think about fallenness. One of the ways we can think about fallen, this is just one of the ways, and this is just a riff. People are all cool jamming out on the guitar. Doesn't matter what you do, this way, that way. Play a little this, play a little that. What are you speaking to? Minor chords, major chords? How much distortion? What tradition? Are you creating your own new tradition. How mathematical is it? How geometrical is it? How is it interesting to the ears? How is it interesting to the mind, theoretically? Like John Cage, only certain people like it, but the people who like it love it. And there's a big audience for it. John Cage, I think that's his name, he would have done spectacularly in this age. Kind of like Rauschenberg. Rauschenberg would have done awesome in this age, right? In fact, I just decided I'm predicting a Rauschenberg comeback. Everybody these days knows the name Andy Warhol. Few people know the name Rauschenberg. I predict 200 years from this day, Rauschenberg will be as well known as Warhol. Because just in the same way in the quote-unquote classical systems, because we consider both Plato and Aristotle classical, is one more classical? Who's the true classic there? Tough one. And it sucks that the history of philosophy in the West has been reduced. It sucks and it's good. Because God works in these slippery, wet braids. God works in this twisting. This twisting that truly exists galactically. Even we ourselves. This body. This crusty old, fugly, hairy, ugly, crusty body as it is now, at the same time, beautifully. I had when I was born, my mom was a young mom. She was fucking gorgeous. And when I was born, I was ugly. Because I was a preemie. I had little fucking chicken legs. And still do. Though in the middle of my life, my legs were big and fat. My ass was enormous. My grandmother said it was the Melindy butt. Because her maiden name was Melindy. She was one of 9, my grandmother. She died recently. But she always said, you got a Melindy butt. And I did. Big old fat butt. I got all kinds of pictures of me in my old football uniform, standing next to my other friends in football uniforms. And they got these nice little butts. And I got this big old huge butt. Even when I was working out. I still haven't gotten to like the first premise of what I wanted to get to. That I'm an adolescent. I failed, right? So I guess part of my message, and I don't want to be all weepy about it. I don't want to be like, wah, wah, wah. But I do want to say, like, when I was younger, I had really high ideals, and they were like overblown, sanctimonious, puritanical. At the same, I was playing a lot of different mental and societal and moral games with myself, right? As we all do. It's hard to work that out. Some people get that Plinko game right, and they get to a place that works and is consistent and have a consistent life. And it may be in this or that sphere of belief, or of worldview, or of social situations, for lack of a better distinctual term. I hate it when I try to be specific. But I'm an adolescent. I'm still an adolescent. And as an adolescent, what do you want? Girls. How did I live my life before about 7 years ago. How did I live that life 6 years ago? Because after high school, slowly, I still had male relationships, but it slowly transformed over about a decade. So from my late teens, early 20s to my late 20s, early 30s, my life progressed from friendships with men primarily, gradually, toward girlfriend relationships. So I'd have this 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year relationship with a woman. I basically had a couple 5-year relationships with women, a couple year, a year, but always seeking that fulfillment, that love of my life that would fulfill me and who I would fulfill. The ones we've been looking for, that want, that romance under God. However it is that we define God. And I myself struggled with that definition over time, over and over and over again, as I still do now. Though it has progressed. It has its ups and downs. It just totally sucks because for the types of people who talk about God, I'm on the lowest spectrum. Yet. I mean, I am. I failed at everything. Everything. I've done just about every horrible sin. I haven't murdered anybody. I never intentionally, maliciously tried to take. But what I did do was take by tricking myself, or, with the influence of darkness, which some say is the evil one. I say our accumulated error is the evil one. We all are stakeholders of the evil one. We of us who are not saints. We of us... Now, what's a saint? What's resurrection? Jesus told his disciples, you will do these things and better. Right? I'm paraphrasing. You see this shit I'm doing? Here, I'm going to give you a little bit of that Holy Ghost, and you're going to do some shit. You're going to come back and think about it, and later on, Holy Ghost and you are going to be married. And you're going to do even better shit than I did. I'm paraphrasing. Am I? Many of the disciples and the apostles were crucified. Many who came before were crucified. In some sense, you could consider I guess you could say there's the faithful and the doubtful criminal. And some people might say,